Welcome back to another Trailmakers tutorial with Fenrir. Today we're going to be going over my logic systems that I've been putting in my recent fighter jets to make them adaptable in mid-combat. Over here we have an example all laid out and ready to go, but first I'll show you some of the systems in the real thing. The first system is our maneuvering system, which allows us to change the maximum angle of all our control surfaces and thrust vectoring to whatever we'd like, up to a range of 45 degrees. And it adjusts the sensitivity as well, so it's still very fluid, well, a little bit twitchy, but fully analog control. It doesn't skip any range of motion when you increase it. And also, we have adaptable fire systems, where we start off with just 2 smart cannons active, then we can toggle it up to 4, and hit the same button one more time to bring it all the way up to 6. On the demonstration plane I also have a system for double rockets that I'll show off, but this one only has single ones, so I gotta skip that right now. And yeah, actually I think we could probably come in for a landing and check out the demonstration model and start getting a better idea of what I'm talking about. So over here we have our logic demonstration vehicle with all the guts on display. And I'll probably go into build mode in a moment to use the cursor to point things out, but we're going to work our way down from the top to the bottom in our color-coded list here. First off, we have the firing system in red with its indicator lights. Blue means 2 guns, green means 4 guns, and orange means 6 guns. And you can see we have an accumulator that rises from 0 to 1 to 2, as well as 3 comparison gates up there that each detect the value of 0, 1, or 2. And here, I'll pull it up in build mode, and I'll run through these real quick, and then we'll build them all from scratch. Like I'll rip out this panel here, and then we'll start from scratch on a blank jet, because there's actually no input controls on anything except for the main thrusters here. But anyways, I'm skipping around a little bit. Back to the firing system. We have the toggle as right on the D-pad, so we'll start off at the button that does that. Actually, no. We'll start off with what happens when the accumulator is at 0, when we haven't pressed that toggle button at all yet. So when the accumulator is at 0, our first comparison gate is active, which is linked into this AND gate, and the AND gate is linked into, oh right, we don't have a duh. That's what this gap is. In order to switch it, the AND gate is linked into the OR gate, and then back into the comparison gate, or the accumulator. I'm saying everything wrong today. But the reason that gate is missing is because this first pair of smart cannons does have an input. Because we're always going to have at least 2 active. We just have these first ones set up normally, with no delay at all. I know that the second pair has a delay of 0.08, and the third pair has a delay of 0.16, but that's just to stagger the fire out a little bit. Anyways, back to the logic. Once you toggle it over to be a value of 1 on the accumulator, it activates this comparison gate, which, as you might have guessed, is linked into the AND gate below it, which also has the OR gate hooked into it. But also, it activates this other AND gate, which has an OR gate on X going into it. So that when we press our firing button, as long as number 1 is active here, that'll fire our second pair of smart cannons here. You can see we have them toggled on from this AND gate here. And the same kind of thing you could expect going on here, except a little bit different. We have, first off, we have the comparison gate set at 2. Then we have the AND gate is set to -1 and goes into an arithmetic gate this time. And that just multiplies the signal by a value of 3, which I think I could have done 2, but I might have had it set up differently earlier. But anyways, it multiplies the value by enough to fully reset the accumulator, because the accumulator is set to steps. So it'll only go up by the amount that's first put into it. It won't continue to rise, but if you put a larger than 1 value signal into there, it'll jump by that value, not just by 1. So when we multiply the signal up to 3, well, -3 because the AND gate is at negative output, it drops the signal of -3 into the accumulator and fully drains it out. And I know that's a little bit wordy. I'm sorry about that. It's not all that complex, I don't believe. Next up in orange is a very similar system, but smaller, with just a little bit extra on the side here for our rockets. And this little bit on the side here is where we're going to start off on this one. We have a NOR gate, which doesn't have any inputs to it, and is just linked directly to an AND gate. And the AND gate has a control of L2. And what this is doing for us is giving us a guaranteed output of 1 off of pressing L2, which is normally a variable input button, and would give us any sort of odd number in between when we hit our accumulator. But when we have it set up like this, it guarantees a value of 1, so it'll set our accumulator up by 1 every time we click it. And then this one here is set up on a delay of 0.2 before it sends our negative signal, multiplies it, and sends it back to the accumulator. And that just gives the rocket enough time to fire before it switches back over to neutral. Because we start off at the value of 0, of course, not firing any rockets. Then when we go to a value of 1, it fires the first pair of rockets, which all the rockets have a duration of 0.1, so they only fire once when the comparison gate gets triggered, no matter how long you stay in that set of rockets. And next we can move on to the maneuvering stuff. Now that we've got the firing systems out of the way, so next up we have the maneuvering systems. And we'll start off with the simple stuff, because the jet has, if we take it out of build mode here, it starts off with 20% of its maximum maneuvering power already locked in, and it doesn't go any lower than that. So we'll start with the system that puts that in, then work our way down to the blue and greens that let us raise and lower our maximum value. So right now I've just got stick pressed all the way down, and if I press down on the D-pad to increase our maneuvering, it raises our pitch controls up, and if we do the opposite, press up on the D-pad, it lowers them back down. Sorry about my terrible camera work. It's always a little hard to keep this steady at these weird angles. And I'm pressing a lot of buttons, of course. But anyways, so you might have heard the thrusters going there when I was just using the pitch controls, and that's because we have a little bit of logic support for our thrust vectoring, as well as an air brake feature here, which I should have probably moved that over there because these are two separate circuits in the sub-maneuvering systems. We have, these two OR gates, R1 and L1, and they're both linked into an AND gate, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Each one of these, L1, is linked up to the space thruster on the left here, our left maneuvering thruster, for a yaw, and then the same thing for the R1. It's hooked up to the right side there for our right yaw. And they're both hooked up to an AND gate with a negative signal. The negative signal goes to both of them to turn them off if we're yawing in both directions, as well as our big elevator fins here, which are set up to spread outwards in the negative direction to give us a simple air brake. So you can see our yaw is only set to 20%, so it only shifts over a little bit, but when we press the air brake and hold both of them open, it spreads them all the way. And if we didn't have that little logic circuit, they would just be canceling themselves out and maintaining a straight direction instead. So it's just a simple air brake incorporated into something that I already was using to run the thrusters for our yaw thrust vectoring. And then these ones over here are just the rest of the thrust vectoring support, which for low speeds, anytime we're not using main thrust, activates our maneuvering thrusters whenever we make our maneuvers. So even when we're at low speeds, that's how we can seem like we have gyros, but we don't. Because the thrusters will push us around in a direction, whether we've got forward speed or not, going over our control surfaces, simulating the wind and all that stuff. But anyways, moving forward to the little bit more complex side of the maneuvering system, we have the adaptable parts. Well, not quite yet. We have the blue is our fixed in place values for our servos and hinges. So each of these just runs at an output of 0.2. I was going to say 20%, but 0.2. And then this one here is just routing our pitch or our roll controls to the negative side on our servos, because we have pitch and roll run through the same servo. And in order to do that, we have the speeds different. So we've got roll going into our negative OR gate here, and then directly into the right side servo. And then the negative roll goes into the left side servo, of course. I think I just said that, didn't I? Did. But then we also have our controls for our rudders, as well as the hinges for our thrust vectoring, which are down here. Because we have the full three-dimensional thrust vectoring, and I'll turn up the maneuvering mode a little bit so it's easier to notice. You can see the angles outwards, and actually, wait, that one's not hooked up all the way, is it? So that would be, not select all. That would be this one. No, it is. I don't know why that wasn't working. Oh, that's why. I don't know how I didn't notice that it was also doing... Oh, it's because I was pitching up, wasn't I? So there we go. Now it's... Oh, pressing too many buttons. Now it's showing off the yaw thrust vectoring on both sides. Just had a little bit of a miswiring issue there. It happens. But anyways, back to the logic gates themselves. The adaptable part. The part that seems really complex, but it's actually just 7 logic gates here for the entire adaptable part. We have the accumulator, which is set to a minimum of 0.1, and that's just so that we have red show up as our base color here. It's not to actually give us a starting value of anything, it's just kind of arbitrary. And then a maximum of 0.8, because we already have 0.2 accounted for in our blue system. So we've got 20% up there, and then the other 80% is in our variable system. and it's set to a scale of 40, so that it takes 2 seconds to fully change from nothing to full. And it's just routed into each of these aggregate blocks. And what they're all set to is the product, which means it multiplies all the signals that go into it and uses that as the output. And by putting our controls directly into the positive and negatives of our aggregate blocks and having it multiplied by accumulator value, we get a variable output to all of our servos and stuff. So like, this is our roll controls, so that goes, one of them goes to this control here, and the other goes to our OR gate that switches the signal over to the other side. And the pitch is even more straightforward, because the speeds are set up on the servos so that I can just toggle them all on. Otherwise it'd be a lot more blocks to do the pitch system if I did the roll as the even one. But that's nonsense. Anyways. And then it's the same thing with the big elevator fins for our rudders. And it's I did forget to mention on the blue ones here, it's a little bit different for the hinges. You probably noticed when I highlighted them, but they have an output of 0.75, and that's because hinges have the exponential curve to them. So when they get a little bit of a signal, they barely move, and they need a pretty substantial signal to move at all, just because their sensitivity increases the more or the higher the signal is. It's just one of their weird quirks, different than servos, that respond the same every time. But yeah, I pull it back out of build mode. You can see down there at the bottom, as we raise up our accumulator, our indicator gradually changes throughout the color cycle, and it doesn't give any outputs directly to our what the heck are they called, aggregate blocks, until we start using our control stick, or L1 and R1 for our yaw. And it doesn't display the value coming out of them, of course. I could have hooked up numbers gates, I suppose, but that would have been tedious, and it wouldn't have shown up on the screen very well anyways. But I suppose that about covers it for our overview. And if you want to stick around, we'll build it all from scratch, so you can get a better feel for it if you want to do it yourself. Anyways, if you're only going to watch up to this point, thanks for watching. Leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. It helps out the channel and makes me happy. But anyways, let's just go ahead and delete all of that, and we'll set up a new platform for it. And now we're going to start off with a blank slate with none of our controls active, except for the one pair of guns that's always active, and our main thrust, which is always available. But right now it doesn't have any controls for its servos or hinges or elevator fins. So, just like the demonstration that was laid out before, we'll start with the guns and then work our way downwards. So like several of these systems do, we're going to start off with an accumulator. And this one's going to have a minimum of 0. A maximum of 2. I can get to it. And set to use steps. Then we're going to have 3 comparison gates. And we're going to set them all to equals. And we're going to attach the accumulator into each of them. The first one's getting a threshold of 0. The second one keeps a threshold of 1. And the last one gets a threshold of 2. Next, we need the OR gate for our switching control. And we give it a duration of 0.1. Well, actually, let's go ahead and give it a duration of 0.2. I believe that's what it's supposed to be. Ooh. Yeah. Now that I'm remembering correctly, it's definitely 0.2. But then we have 2 AND gates here. Actually 3 AND gates, but one of them is going to be different. So we'll take the OR gate and link it into all the AND gates there. Then take our comparison gates above them and link them into the AND gate below. Now these first 2 will go directly into the accumulator, just as they are. Then the last one, we're going to route through an arithmetics gate after we change its output to -1. Then the arithmetics gate here, we're just going to give it a constant of 3, which is more than we need, but I scrolled past 2, so whatever. And we set it to multiply and route it back to our accumulator. So now, although it's going to be a little hard to see without my camera that I deleted, when we press right on the D-pad, each time, it cycles through our accumulator. Is there a better view for this? Not really. Maybe there. You can see the accumulator better. If I zoom in and post. But yeah. So each time I press it, it steps up by 1. And now we just set our firing button with another OR gate. Set it to X. Then grab our AND gates. We only need 2 of them, because if you remember, we've got the first set is always set to fire. So I'm still doing that. I'm not used to the new controls so well. But we take our OR gate and we connect it to both of these AND gates here. And then again, we take the comparison gate from above and link it to the AND gate below it. Then the one that's hooked up to our second comparison gate will turn on our second pair of guns, whenever we press X, that is. And whenever we press X, when the third one is active, it'll trigger both sets of the rear guns. So now, we have the fire rate of 1 ding when it runs out of ammo, and we can switch it up to 2 dings when we run out of ammo, and then we can switch it all the way to full, and we get all 3 of our dings when we run out of ammo. And I suppose you could also see the ammo counter running down to 1/3, 2/3, and all the way, of course. So that's the full system for our machine guns. Next we'll do the rockets. We can actually, I believe, we can just hijack this accumulator. If we copy it vertically like this, so that it doesn't connect to anything when it spawns in, you see the little exclamation mark there. That means it's not going to be wired into anything that we already had wired to it. And if we just check that out, you can see that we don't have anything clicked here on it, and we don't have any little wires leading into it. That's because we're going to start off again with a signal or a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 2, and it's going to use steps. So it was faster to do that than do all the scrolling through the values again. Then we just need 2 comparison gates. Not paint shop. Configurator. We're going to set them to equals. And we're going to set, we might as well pretend that there's a value of 0 here. And we're going to leave this one set to 1. And this one to 2. And then we have to have our little system that brings our L2 signal up to a guaranteed 1.0. So we need a NOR gate and an AND gate. The NOR gate goes directly into the AND gate, and the AND gate simply gets L2 as its positive input. And then we hook that into our accumulator, the AND gate, that is. And then we have a multiplication gate. Right now we have first an OR gate to reverse the signal. Because, yeah, I'm skipping a few steps here, aren't I? Let's go back to the accumulator and hook it up to the comparison gates, which we hadn't done. We'll take our first comparison gate, which is set to the threshold of 1, and hook it up to the first pair of rockets, which I'll remind you have a duration of 0.1, so that they only fire once per time this is activated. Then the second comparison gate goes to the second pair of rockets. And when that gate's active, we want it to trip this OR gate, but we want it to wait a little bit, so let's give it a delay of 0.2. And we need it to reverse the signal, so we give it a negative output, and run it into the arithmetics gate, which we then set that to multiply, set it to 2 or higher, and route it into the accumulator. And I believe that's the full circuit for that. So when we press L1 once, we fire 1 pair of rockets. We press it again, we fire the second pair. And we're not resetting because I'm an idiot. For this one, our arithmetics gate needs a duration of 0.1 and a pause of 0.1. In case we hold the button for too long, this will let it constantly refresh itself. So now, when we press it once, we get the 1 fire. Press it again, we get the second fire. Let them recharge. And then we get the first one again, and the second one again. Good thing I remembered that. Or, good thing we're testing that, I suppose. So yeah, remember that if you're doing the rocket system, your arithmetics gate will need a duration of 0.1 and a pause of 0.1. Next, we'll do the air brake and the thrust vectoring support. So we'll need a couple of OR gates, and an AND gate. And we'll do the yaw first. So the first OR gate gets L1, gets connected to the AND gate, and to the left maneuvering thruster. Then the next one gets a control of R1, hooks into the AND gate, and also the right maneuvering thruster. Then the AND gate gets a signal of -1. If I can get my cursor back. Goes into both of the maneuvering thrusters to disable their thrust when we yaw in both directions, and both big elevator fins, which are set up so that their negative turning radius, the red one, goes to the outside for both of them. And that's our little air brake system, as well as the yaw thrust vectoring. So then we can grab 4 more OR gates. And these are quick ones. We just give them each one of the controls from the left stick. So left, down, up, and right. I know I said that in an odd order, but I keep track of them that way on the for other projects. And then we can select all 4 of them, because we have pitch and roll run through the same servos and thrusters here, and hook them up to the maneuvering thrusters in the back there. So now, we still don't have any actual movement, but what? I must have misclicked something. Yeah, I don't know how I misclicked that gun, or maybe that was just Trailmakers being Trailmakers, because that was a weird miswiring. Anyways, next we'll do the ones that I had painted in blue before, after I shimmy these up a bit to give us some more space. We have 2 more rows. So first up, we have an OR gate that we're going to immediately switch to negative. We're not going to give it any control, and we're going to hook it up into our left maneuvering servo. And that's for inverting the signal that we need to do to make our roll control work. Just given that we're doing pitch and roll in the same servos, it tends to complicate things a little bit. We've got a speed of 1 on this side, -1 on this side, and in the front it's opposite, because the pitch controls have to be inverted. But back to the logic. We'll grab, oh, that's an AND gate. We'll grab some more OR gates. We need pitch and first we got roll, then we have pitch, then we have yaw for the left rudder, yaw for the right rudder, yaw for the left thrust vectoring, and yaw for the right thrust vectoring. So we set up the controls here. We give right and left, and we'll hook that up to our inverter and our right side maneuvering servo. Then we put our pitch controls on the next one, up and down, and hook that into all of our servos, the front ones and the back ones. Next, we're doing the left rudder, which, as I recall, needs a green input of R1 and a red input of L1. And the opposite for our right rudder, give it L1 in the positive and R1 in the negative. Then for our thrust vectoring, we just need L1 in the positive with no negative. Then we hook that up to the hinge. And, oh, Trailmakers, I saw that. Where's the gate that happened on? This one. No? I could have sworn I saw it toggle the input on. With that phantom cursor weirdness that's still going on. I hope they fix that soon. Anyways, in our final gate, we put R1, and hook it up to the hinge on the right side. Then we adjust our values. So we'll select the first 4 here and give them an output of 0.2. And then we'll select the other 2, the ones that route into the hinges, and we give them an output of 0.75, which gives it a roughly equivalent percentage of travel in the hinge. It's not perfect in this system, but it works for it. So now we've got our first 20% of movement on all of our controls. We've got the air brake, and we've got all the weapon systems, of course. So the final piece of the puzzle is the variable section. And for that, we need one more accumulator. Then we need a bunch of aggregate blocks for all of our controls. We get the first one. Pitch, roll, yaw, and the thrust vectoring yaw. And we'll take the accumulator. I give it a positive of down on the D-pad and a negative up on the D-pad, just because of an old habit. When I had a single toggle control like the gunfire for my maneuvering, I always had it down on the D-pad, so I'm kind of fixed in place. But I suppose it would make more sense to have up on the D-pad increase it and down on the D-pad decrease it. But that's more of a preference thing. The actual inputs aren't set in stone after all. But what is set in stone is it needs a minimum of 0, and we're going to give it a maximum of 0.8, if I can get to it. And we're going to give it a scale of 0.4, so that it will take 2 seconds for it to entirely fill up. And because this one's going to be an analog, we don't use steps. And we hook that into each of our aggregate blocks. Then we can select all of our aggregate blocks and set them to product mode. Then put in our controls. So left and right, and that gets routed into our inverter, as well as our right maneuvering servo. Then this one gets pitch and roll controls, up and down, and we route that into all 4 of the maneuvering servos, front and back. Then these ones get the same controls as above. R1 in the positive and L1 in the negative for the left side, and the opposite for the right side. Then finally, just L1 and hook it into the hinge, and just R1 and hook it into the hinge. And I suppose for this one in particular we should put some indicators on. So take a hue light panel and route it into there. And in order to have it not show up black as its immediate setting, we just clicked up the minimum to 0.01, which isn't enough to really affect us or give us that much more power. I mean, it's only 1% more power for our maneuvering, but it'll give it a setting of red for our beginning so it transitions more smoothly. And my voice is dying a little bit, I apologize. But if we just copy that over, we can put one on the back of the plane too. You can see a little better when we're looking at that. And now, we've got our variable maneuvering mode. So I'll push all the way down in the stick And then as we increase it, you can see it increases the maximum angle that we can be at, where we can achieve the entire range of motion in between it with no skips, which was what my early prototype of this had an issue with. It had the same like 20% range of motion, but it would change blah 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 where it was. It was just a crummier version of this. And yeah, that's the full logic system for my adaptable fighter jet planes. And I suppose I'll close the video with just final notes on it. Well, it's very effective. It makes planes good at formation flying and dogfighting alike. Because for formation flying, you want the tight controls for very smooth, coordinated movements. And then you can crank it up to whatever crazy amount of maneuvering you can engineer into your planes. Some of mine get pretty wild when they're at maximum value. Like if I pull out the Black Cat again. This one here, unlike our demonstration model, has 3 thrusters on each of its maneuvering servos. So it has quite a significant amount of maneuvering force. Even in red, when we're at 20% maneuvering, it handles pretty well. But like I said, the lower maneuvering modes are best for like formation flying and such. For fights, I usually crank it up to at least yellow, which is around 35 to 40%. And that gives us a pretty tremendous amount of pitch control, as well as good roll and good yaw. But if I dial it up all the way to purple, we have, well, if I get into a roll here, we have insane amounts of pitch control. Pretty crazy amounts of yaw as well. And although it's a little tricky to get into a straight barrel roll, because the plane feels kind of drunk at this maneuvering level, it does have good roll control. But anyways, that definitely about does it for the video. Again, if you want to support the channel or just make me happy, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye now.
PlayStation